Welcome to part 3 of my circular layout project, where I will be building up the low relief scenery and adding buildings and details until half of the circuit is just about finished. But first, a quick recap on what I did in part 2, which was to lay the track, do a bit of basic ballasting, install the track joiners where the two parts of the board meet, and all the electrical gubbins to get power to the tracks, and from one side of the baseboard to the other, until we can start running some trains. But as you can see, everything is literally a bit flat. So in this part, I'll be building up the scenery until we've got something a bit more realistic. But before I start sticking stuff down, I need to check some clearances, starting with the girders of the bridge over my little stream. For this, I'm using locos and coaches, which I know have the largest overhang either at the ends or on the sides. Then I'm doing very much the same thing for the buildings, making sure nothing's going to hit them as it goes past. But as I'm limited with space, I want to keep those clearances as tight as possible. Happy with the position of the bridge girders, I have spray primed them and glued them into place, and started thinking about exactly where the landscape is going to go, experimenting with the position of some trees. Now I've got a plan, I can start building up the layers of foam board, which will form the basic underlying structure of the scenery. This I'm doing section by section, first marking and carefully cutting the curved outside edge of the piece, before rather more brutally hacking away at the surface. For this, I'm using a nice sharp scalpel with a fresh blade, making sure that I generally work away from myself and keep my fingers well out of the way to avoid any injuries. Keeping the blade at a shallow angle, I can gradually carve away at the foam board, bit by bit, and then pulling away and discarding the spare bits. This is largely a make it up as you go along process, and as I'm using the foam board that hasn't been stuck down, it's easy to discard anything I don't like and start again with that bit. I can also transfer the section to the cutting mat and work on it there until I'm happy with the shape. When I am, I can commit to gluing it to the baseboard, for which I'm using some rocket card glue, liberally applied to the back of my section before pressing down firmly and leaving to dry. In this area, I want the hills to be just a little bit higher, so I'm gluing one of my torn away offcuts onto the top layer of the foam board. I'm leaving the outside edge to protrude over the layers below, and I can trim this accurately when the glue is dry. Now I can go in again with my sharp knife and make any final adjustments. The laminated layers of foam board is a good quick way to establish the basic forms of the hills, but obviously the surface is very artificial feeling. So the next job is to use plaster bandage to smooth over those unnatural steps and blend in to form a naturally undulating hillside. So what I'm doing is briefly dunking the bandage into a bowl of clean water and building up the surface with smallish pieces of bandage, torn or cut to size, and then smoothed into each other with my fingertips. I'm being careful not to drench the foam board below, as the top layers will start to peel off if I use too much water. I'm not particularly worried about the weave of the bandage showing through, as that will all be smoothed in later on, and it's going to be painted and static grassed after that. But I do want to pay attention to the edge of the board, and carefully trim the bandage where the contours meet the curved side. You'll also see I'm not building up a really thick layer of bandage. The foam board below provides the structure, and the 2 or 3 layers of the bandage, giving us the smooth surface and blending into the sides of the track bed. Jumping ahead a little, you'll see that I've already built up the layers of foam board on the other side of the track, this time with more layers and some steeper cliffs. And now I'm repeating the process of building up the plaster bandage. This time I can use some slightly bigger bits as I've got more area to cover, but I still want to make sure I'm not drenching the foam board, and just steadily, gradually building up the 2 or 3 layers of smoothed in plaster bandage until I'm happy with the general shape and the undulations of the surface. When that's finished, I can crack on with the area on the other side of the stream, opposite the signal box. I could, of course, do all the foam board bits first, and then all the plastering bits afterwards, but by doing it section by section, I'm able to let the bits I've already done inform my plans for the next part. And in this section, I've decided to dig into the baseboard, as well as building up on top of it. The 2 layers of foam board underneath track level are very much there for my stream, but they also provide a malleable layer, which I can dig into elsewhere around the track to make some embankments as well as the other cuttings, like this area just beside the level crossing. You'll also see here that very late in the day I found the perfect marker for black foam board in the shape of a gold felt tip pen, which has made marking up where I want to slice much easier. And here I'm just gluing down a small section just beside the level crossing, where my slopes are a little less natural and a bit more man-made. Once again, I'm completing the plastering of this section before moving on to the next. As well as not being confronted by an onerous area to be covered all in one go, I found my technique has improved and I'm getting quicker. My foam board hacking skills are also getting better, and the discovery of the gold pen has sped up that too, so it's not long before I'm on to the final part of raised scenics for this half of the layout. Once again, I'm going to be digging into those surface layers, which is going to give me a nice variety of heights, even though practicalities of moving and storing the layout limits me just to low relief, rather than huge hills and cliffs. Although when I get round to the other side of the layout, I'm planning some removable landscaping, along with a tunnel. That's all a little way away in the future, but don't forget to hit that subscribe button, so you don't miss it when it arrives. With the contours of my landscaping complete, I can begin detailing the scenics. But first I want to blend in the edge of my track base, using the Stone Effect textured paint, and make good the edges of the layout with the anthracite spray I used in part 1, all done outside, just to keep it safe. Back inside, I'm underpainting my hillsides with acrylic paint. This will all be covered up with static grass, but will help prevent any patchy show through, and gives me the chance to try out my colours, a mixture of greens, ochres and umbers, which I'm blending on the hillside itself, tweaking the colours to reflect the terrain below, for instance a sandier area by the river, and just continuing until all of the white plaster bandage is covered up. That won't take long to dry completely, and when it is, we can start the static grass. For this I've got a range of lengths from different manufacturers in a similar range of colours as my underpainting. My static grass applicator is nothing fancy, but seems to do the job fine, but a range of mesh sizes might be nice. As with other parts of the project, I'm doing relatively small areas at a time, starting with a brushed coating of dilute PVA. Much like with the colours of the underpainting, I'm mixing my range of static grasses, largely by eye, in the hopper of the applicator, before screwing on the lid, making sure that red cable is touching the mesh. Then, with the crocodile clip at the other end of the black cable, touching or hovering above the surface, I can press the button and shake out the now charged fibres, which will stick end on into the glue below. Between batches, it's important to discharge the applicator by touching the mesh with the black crocodile clip, which creates a satisfying spark. Now, with the second batch, with the slightly altered colour mix, I can attend to some of the specific places, like the banks of the stream. I'm pretty pleased with my first application, but there are some patchy areas, and when it's completely dry, I want to go in again to make good, but also to add some additional textures. This time I've got some dilute PVA in a pump spray bottle, and I'm picking out some of the areas which either need attention or where I want to put some slightly longer lengths or some slightly different colours, both on this side of the railway and on the other, where I've already laid down the first layer, patching any areas that are a bit thin and adding some variety, making sure the grass goes right up to the edge. I won't be making my own trees, and I've got some shop bought ones, but I'm not happy with the regularity of some of the layers of foliage, so I'm going in with a tough pair of scissors and snipping out some of the fibres, particularly at the top of the tree, which is very dense, until I've got a nice, more natural shape. And if at any point you cut away a little bit too much, you can always stick that back in again, using some of the offcuts. And now, when my tree is ready, I need to prepare its site, scratching away the static grass where it's going to go, and vacuuming away any of the debris and loose bits, before applying a nice dollop of No More Nails adhesive in a circle the size of the stump of the tree. Using a glue like this, rather than a standard PVA, ensures the bond will go right through the static grass layer and onto the hillside below. I'm now brushing on some dilute PVA to the plastic stump and the surrounding area before sprinkling some earthy coloured flock to blend it into the landscape. I'm now turning my attention trackside once more, and using the same dilute PVA, I'm adding to the ballast that I laid down when laying the track. Working in small areas, I can be a little bit more varied and naturalistic in the application, getting up to the edges and in between the sleepers. I'm also using a slightly coarser blend, which in combination with the stone textured paint and the original ballasting gives a really rich texture. I can also spend a bit of time in specific locations, like the bridge, getting a realistic finish. And here, I'm adding some shrubs alongside the wall of the signal box. In a couple of my other videos, I go into specifics of how I detailed 2 areas of the layout. So click on the links above for how I created a realistic stream, and detailing the level crossing with a realistic road surface, adding fences and other detailing from road markings to crossing gates. But don't forget to come back and watch the rest of this movie too. Back to the project, I've got one last area to add static grass to, and that's the garden of the cottage. As it's a flat lawn, that can go straight onto the baseboard, but I don't want it creeping underneath the cottage, so I'm masking that off first, using temporary tape to find the edges and then painting in dilute PVA, going right up to the edge, but not over the pin mechanism. And as this is a lawn, I'm using a slightly greener mix, and only the shortest filaments of static grass. And with the mesh cap screwed on, I can proceed to shake over the glued area, gradually building up until I've got the coverage and the colour I want. Not forgetting to discharge the static in the applicator when I've finished, and remove the masking tape. Continuing to add some extra details will be an ongoing project, but I just wanted to finish this video by adding some relay boxes, using a Wills plastic kit, the construction of which couldn't be simpler. Having cleaned up the edges of each piece, I'm applying the tiniest amount of superglue with the end of a cocktail stick, before carefully assembling, getting the doors the right way up, and then finishing off with the roof. This set has a big one and a small one, and the larger one is going to go next door to my signal box. So I'm just clearing an area for it to stand up straight, and brushing away any of the loose ballast, for a nice clean foundation, onto which the relay box can be glued with some no more nails squeezed into the bottom and pressed firmly into position. The smaller of the two boxes will go on the other side of the crossing, and like with the tree, I'm just scratching away some of the static grass before applying no more nails for a solid foundation, with any excess glue scraped away once it's in position. Now we've done all the hard work, we can have some fun and run some trains, relieved that all the clearances are properly accurate. If you've enjoyed this video and found it useful, why don't you check out some of my other projects, and please don't forget to like and subscribe.